Okay. So, again, I shall have to use my articulators over here. I hope people don't jump too much at my saying that this is an articulator. Any phoneticians in the room who feel sort of a bit perturbed by my calling this an articulator? I mean, it is not a glottis, I realize that. Okay, so I need some paint. I have some paint over here. Let's say I want to draw a nice teddy bear. I'll be pretty brisk about it. So do like this, like that, like that. Teddy bear, something like that. Now the point is that you all more or less recognize this as a drawing of a teddy bear. It has, in a sense, there is a sense in which it has the shape of a teddy bear. We can sort of notice that it has sort of a roundish thing here, which we take to be its head. It has sort of a roundish thing here, which we take to be one ear, another one over here. There are two roundish things here in the middle. Take those to be eyes. Something here which resembles a sort of snout and mouth. Good. However, there is a different level of shape at work also in this drawing, because I could have done it differently. I would argue that something like this, and you know, this is of course a different prosody I'm using now. Okay, so say ideationally or something, these two are pretty much identical. Yeah, pretty much identical. They consist of the same kinds of structures. However, and can we please zoom in on the drawing? Because I want to zoom in on this part here as much as you can. Yes, look, there, look, yes, there, thank you. Notice how there is a second, smaller scale level of shape in play here. Because you can notice how there are all sorts of various ins and outs here. Yes, you can all see it. Over here, however, they're different. I mean, they're smaller. Here, you can actually see how the individual hairs on my paintbrush have left individual traces of paint. Now, this is a level of shape which actually carries much of the prosodic information, because it is this level of shape which is in fact sort of holds the information about the vigor and the energy combined with the specific affordances of a given implement that you then perceive as a drawing done really briskly or a drawing done really slowly. Because if I were to go out of the room, come back in 10 minutes and look at this picture, not having seen me in fact on screen doing the articulation, whether or not it was slow or not slow, and I were to ask you, okay, which one of those drawings was in fact done the fastest or the slowest? You say, oh, that one looks slower and more controlled. And that one, I can see that one was more or less done faster. So the information, the prosodic information, is in fact in that lower scale shape. So if we can just sort of switch to the screen over here. We can't just speak of a level at which there is a shape. There are maybe 2 or 3 or 4 levels of shape in a given graphic structure, all of which work on different timescales, because these micro-shape features here are articulated at a much smaller timescale. I mean, the individual paintbrush hair that does something like this does so on a faster timescale than the combination of paintbrush hairs which makes the loop there. And so on screen here, I just made this slide to demonstrate that we can speak of scalar level L shape and scalar level L-1 shape, just to say that there are various different levels at which shape are in play. Now, in order to discuss a more sort of applications-oriented view on this, I'd like to ask you here what kind of company you think lurks behind this logo, because this is a logo. What sort of company would you think this is? Anyone? Class? Anyone? What sort of company? Soft drink?
Soft toys. Soft toys.
Soft toys, as in teddy bears and stuff. That's one option. Anyone else? Anyone else? Ice cream. Yeah. When I give this example to students in Denmark, they consistently say toys and ice cream. Exactly. They consistently say ice cream brands or toy brands. And that it goes to say that maybe the social order of graphics is in fact in these days sort of a globalized phenomenon, yes? In fact, it is a petrol company. It is a Swedish petrol company called Preeminent, or Preem. Now, the reason we don't typically associate this kind of a graphic shape with an oil company is probably because we are more used to a shape being articulated using Adobe Illustrator software, which does not give us all these level L-1 bits and pieces of prosodic information. Okay? So in logos like Statoil, which is a Norwegian oil company, or Q8, like this one, or indeed BP, such as this one, there is no sense of prosodic information in the graphic structure. One might argue that the lower level shape is in fact a marker for deictic information, that somehow the performer, the actual body which has articulated the graphic structure, somehow peeks out of the graphic structure. And if you're an oil company, you don't want to represent anything too individual. You will probably want your logo to deictically point to an organizational and legal subject as opposed to an individual subject of flesh and emotions and needs and desires. Okay? You will want the logo to represent something much more stable because a lot of money is at stake. It has to represent something much more stable than an individual. Yeah? So, would you agree that that is a plausible thesis? Now look, this is more or less just breaking the Statoil logo and the Preeminent logo into L+1, L and L-1 scales of articulatory events. So it's not very interesting. What is more interesting is probably this. Because these are all logos for humanitarian organizations. And in that, shall we say, discourse, it is much more commonplace to use logos that in fact have this prosodic information. Now, many of these logos, I don't particularly think that they have in fact been articulated using brushes and paint. Look, for example, at something like this. I don't believe that any paintbrush in history would in fact produce sort of individual hair and paint traces that exactly resemble this. This, I suppose, is some kind of conventionalization of what that prosodic information looks like. But the object is probably still deictically to refer to individuality and interpersonality. We want a sense there is in fact a human being behind the articulation of this logo and by metaphor behind the organization. So in oil companies, this very sort of strict use of graphic shape without any prosodic information is commonplace. This is an oil company. This is an oil company. And if one were to be a bit sort of critical discoursey, one might argue that oil companies now are beginning to somehow subsume the graphic conventions of humanitarian organizations as their focus shifts to sort of climate issues, to various kinds of agendas that are typically more grassrooty and typically the domain of NGOs and humanitarian organizations and stuff like that. They have begun to sort of subsume that kind of expression because they will probably also want to be identified with particular, you know, individuality and interpersonality and stuff like that. So I hope to now have conveyed to you an idea of how we conceive of fast timescales and slower cultural timescales in various different materialities, also in language, to be bidirectionally, diachronically coupled, and that it is this kind of dynamic that drives the ongoing renewal of conventionalization through time. Okay, so that's the end of my talk.